On today's show, the Houston Rockets were able to grind out a win against the Detroit Pistons without Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, still no Kevin Porter Jr., and without head coach Stephen Silas. John Lucas handling the reins in the absence of Stephen Silas. So what did we learn about John Lucas's coaching style? What did we learn about how this group responded without so many of their primary scorers available? Big nights from KJ Martin and Tari Eason. A crazy sequence and finish to this game in Detroit. We're going to break it all down for you coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
Hey, Houston fans, I am so happy.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, where you can help us out tremendously by commenting anything below. Your thoughts on now the second win, coached and led by John Lucas. Should the Rockets just move on from Stephen Silas and make John Lucas the interim head coach? Let me know in the YouTube comments. I read each and every one of those every single day. As always, sincerely appreciate you for making Locked On Rockets part of your day, whether it's on the way to work, in the gym, on your lunch break. Thank you for making LOR part of your day every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com. Promo code LOCKEDON. Lots to talk about today from this Rockets-Pistons game. Rockets come away with the win 117-114, and it was a lot to unpack from this one. KJ Martin, Tari Eason, some big games, a crazy kind of sequence there at the end involving KJ Martin, Jae'Sean, Tate to, kind of get the Rockets out ahead and ultimately seal the win for this team. Kind of a game of runs. Big opening start for the Pistons. Rockets go up big in the third. Pistons come back in the fourth. Like a lot of back and forth later in this game. And then John Lucas coaching this Rockets team to another win. The Rockets now have 12 wins on the season. John Lucas responsible for 2 of those wins. And this is a team that has responded in a big way both times John Lucas has been at the helm, and even in preseason, with him coaching them instead of Stephen Silas. But where I want to start is we're going to get into the game flow. We'll get into the coaching, all of that. Let's start with KJ Martin because it ties directly into the coaching. KJ Martin is your Locked On Rockets player of the game from this one. 15 points, 13 rebounds, 7 of 11 shooting, had 1 assist, 1 block, 1 turnover in his 27 minutes of run. But here's the thing, is KJ was actually benched early in this game. And that was kind of the curious part, right? It's a few minutes into this game and, rough early start for the Rockets. And John Lucas pulls KJ out of the game and sits him down. And then KJ doesn't play for the entire rest of the first quarter, misses all of the rest of pretty much a big chunk of the second quarter, doesn't get subbed back in until closer towards halftime, gets to play a few more minutes in the first half. And when asked after the fact, and KJ was sitting over on the bench, he was arms folded, pissed off looking, whatever. And when John Lucas was asked about it, he said, KJ and I got into it because he missed his rotation and got 2 early fouls, and I kept him out. And one of the things I wanted them to know is they got to play hard. I'm not going to reward you for not playing. That is the accountability that we've been just crying for, begging, demanding out of this Rockets team, out of Stephen Silas and the coaching staff, right? And we saw it on display in this game. John Lucas was all over the place in this game, calling guys out. Early in the third quarter, John Lucas ran onto the floor and got a technical foul to yell at Tari Eason for a terrible turnover in transition where he threw the ball ahead and had, nobody was within 10 feet of trying to catch the pass. And John Lucas just runs onto the court and is just yelling at Tari for that kind of stuff. Just, this is the kind of, I don't know, hands-on coaching, aggressive coaching, old school coaching, whatever you want to call it, that I feel like this young Rockets team desperately needs. And you know what? They responded to it. They responded to it in the Milwaukee win. Maybe you credit that win with some of the emotional energy charged up around, Stephen Silas and the passing of his father. Sure. But they responded to John Lucas. And they responded in this game. They had no business winning this game. They're missing all their best players. No Jalen, no Alp, still no Scoot. They had no business winning this game. And yet, KJ getting benched early in the game, John Lucas made his point to KJ, right? Put him back in the game, and then leaned heavily on KJ in the second half. KJ had 10 points and 10 boards in the second half of this game, and he had the sequence to put the Rockets back out in front. Pair of huge buckets late in this game where KJ drives in, gets a strong finish against Jalen Duren, right? Takes the contact, still finishes over the top of him, and then gets to the free throw line. Unfortunately, misses the free throw, but then, and this is the crazy part. So first off, he gets the finish on Jalen Duren, right? Which was so impressive. And then the reactions, oh my God, the reactions from Jabari, Tari in the corner, Jae'Sean, Tate, watching the reactions of all those guys, even Eric Gordon doing his patented, yeah, just the little fist bump celebration. But Jabari just immediately is super hype about it. Jae'Sean Tate was crouched down trying to see if the ball was going to go in or not. It was such a cool moment to see all 5 of those guys celebrating in unison when the shot went in. KJ gets to the free throw line. He misses the free throw, unfortunately, but guess what? KJ's at the line. Jabari and Tari are lined up next to him. Jae'Sean Tate comes crashing in from the perimeter and gets the rebound. He smokes the layup on the putback attempt. But then guess who? KJ Martin is right there to clean it up and get the ball back in, giving the Rockets the lead. A 4-point possession within the final under 40 seconds of this game against the Pistons, and that was what helped give the Rockets the win in this game. I mean, insane sequence to close this one out, and credit to KJ Martin, right? He could have pouted, he could have been upset, he could have been, Lucas is benching me, all of that, right? No. He responded to it, he went out, and then he played incredibly well in the second half. So, credit to KJ Martin and credit to this Rockets team for responding to the way that Coach John Lucas handled them in the absence of Stephen Silas. Something that, again, some of these things that we've saw out of Lucas, right? The way that he was handling this group of guys, this has been something that we have been begging and pleading for a while with this Rockets team. So it was great to see it on display for not once, but a second time this season. And it really does beg the question, would this Rockets team be better off with John Lucas as the interim head coach for the rest of this season from a developmental standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, to try and get the most out of some of these guys for the back half of this season, instead of Stephen Silas, who, again, I feel it's stuck saying this. Stephen Silas was, missed the game because he was at the memorial for his late father, and I still wish him all the best. That's a tough thing, but we've seen it a couple times now, and I think it's a topic of discussion that is very much warranted at this point. Coming up, want to get into some of the game flow of this one, the runs that took place in this game, as well as other takeaways from this one, all of that and more coming up in just one moment. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Next game, how about Joel Embiid to score more than 26.5 points? What about LeBron James to have more than 7.5 rebounds? How about Nikola Jokic to have less than 9.5 assists? Or what about Steph Curry to have more than 3.5 three-pointers made? So what is Prize Picks? It's daily fantasy sports, but how does it work? Basically, you pick 2 to 6 players. If they score more or less than their Prize Pick projection, you can win up to 25 times back on your money on any entry that you submit. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Best part, PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch. That's NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA, you name it, they've got you covered over at PrizePicks. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less, just 1 minute. It's that simple. They're safe, they offer incredibly fast withdrawals, currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, let's take a look at kind of how this game played out the way that it did against the Detroit Pistons. First off, it was a rough start. Like, there ain't no other way. There's no other way to slice it. This was a bad start for the Rockets. So they, no LP, and kind of in surprising fashion, they went with a starting lineup of Daishen Nix, Eric Gordon, KJ Martin, Tari Eason, and Jabari Smith Jr. at the 5. So I was a bit surprised by that. I mean, you've got 2 centers on your roster, and yet you elect to start neither of them and instead roll with Jabari at the 5. Credit to John Lucas. He realized the mistake like 3.5 minutes into the game. He was like, all right, 16-4 start. Rockets are getting cooked. Okay, cool. Let's reel this thing back in and figure out what went wrong. After that rough start, and after John Lucas decided to bench KJ, he went with some combo of Bruno and Garuba at the 5 spot for the rest of the first half. And the Rockets actually wound up outscoring the Pistons the rest of the first half, 55-41. So they were minus 12 in the minutes with Jabari at the 5 spot in the first half. And then they were plus 14 with some combination of Bruno or Garuba at the 5 spot the rest of the way. So I do like that, maybe 16-4 was a bit of a maybe you'd like to see the bleeding stop before then, but credit to Lucas for, realizing, hey, maybe Jabari at the 5 is not super it this game, right? And Lucas did even talk about that kind of going into this game, guys were excited, right? Like Jabari especially was like super like amped because he thought this game was going to be like his night to get all these shots up and to, be the guy, right? Like, and we probably could have stood to see, a few more shots for Jabari, but at the same time, the shot is so concerning at this point. Like he's not hitting anything, man. Like, man, just 2 of 12 shooting. Like, you guys there's something going on. Like, I've said it before. Long term, I'm not worried about it. Long term, yeah, Jabari's going to be fine. But in the immediate here and now, this is concerning. It's like, what is happening? Maybe it is like, he's psyching himself out at this point, or maybe it is a mechanical thing where there's not enough legs in his shot. It's kind of flat. Like, whatever it is, and it's so hard to fix these types of issues mid-season, right? We saw John Lucas and Jalen Green trying to work on his form last season in the middle of the season, and then at some point, Jalen Green kind of like reverted back to his old form. Like, it's really tough to adjust anything mechanically with a shot mid-season. Sometimes it is as much as just saying like, hey, you need more legs in your shot, or hey, you need to, but for Jabari, maybe it is something that needs to be tackled. Get him with a true shooting coach this offseason. Maybe see if you can go poach Chip England from the OKC Thunder. I don't know. It's frustrating to see a guy who was billed as a shooter struggle as much as he has from the floor, but he played really solid defense. Jabari outside of the offensive production in this game was really impressive. I mean, he finished with just 7 points on 2 of 12 shooting, but he had 12 rebounds, he had 2 dimes, 2 steals, 3 blocked shots. Jabari, including a clutch one late. Like, Jabari was very, very solid in this game, despite the lack of offensive production. And that's the one thing that really does stand out about him, right? And I've said it before, but even when he's not producing offensively, Jabari is going to be a guy who can make his impact felt elsewhere in the game with his defense, with his rebounding, even the little flashes of other things that we've seen out of him, like the assist numbers. That's all really encouraging stuff. And then once the shot does start to come around, we're really going to start to see what he can actually be. But getting back to just some of the game flow in here, I mean, Rockets, they went up big in the third quarter, their largest lead of the game, 12 points, 76-64. And then things just spiraled, man. They got out of control. They started, missing shots, turning the ball over. Things got really ugly. And they were down 3 going into the fourth quarter. They completely squandered their lead, which, it looked like, oh, here comes the patented Rockets collapse, right? They had the big lead, and now they're letting go of the rope, all of that. And thankfully, they never gave Detroit like a super big cushion in the fourth quarter. They kept it kind of neck and neck, close, whatever. And then they get all the way down to the wire at the end of the fourth quarter, and they get into the late game KJ Martin sequence that we talked about in segment 1. And the Rockets were able to ultimately come away with the dub. But they're in that fourth quarter. I mean, the Rockets for this game, the shooting woes have been an issue all season for the Rockets, right? And they're missing some of their better shooters and some of their better, maybe not better shooters, better scorers, with no Jalen, no Alp, still no Scoot. They were 3 of 20 from long distance going into the fourth quarter. And then in the fourth quarter, they finished the game shooting 5 of 7. So they, including some back-to-back threes, Jae'Sean Nix, Usman Garuba, both of those guys hitting two threes apiece from long distance in the fourth quarter, as well as Eric Gordon chimed in his only triple, 1 of 8 shooting from downtown for EG in that fourth and final frame. And so thankfully the 3-point shooting kind of came back online for the Rockets, at least just for that little quarter there, so that they could stay close enough to make a play for the game at the very end against the Pistons. This was not a pretty game. Like, the shooting numbers were bad on both sides. Pistons shot 45.8% from the floor. Rockets shot 47.8%. They shot under 30% from 3. Pistons shot 36.8%, so slightly more respectable from 3. But it was just kind of an ugly, choppy kind of game. Decent number of turnovers for both teams, 16 for the Pistons, 17 for the Rockets. But the area that I felt like the Rockets really impacted this game, and it kind of embodied what we saw out of this group of guys, was the rebounding and the second chance points. And that's what I want to talk about coming up in the final segment, as well as some other takeaways from this game, some of the stuff that we learned about this team. What did we learn about this team and how this group of guys can respond without some of their alphas in the lineup? We're going to talk about that. But first, today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Go to TurboTax and don't do your taxes. Meet with an expert who will do them for you. TurboTax experts can relieve you from the stress of taxes and file for you so you can do not taxes. Show your eyes something that are not taxes. Unpack a moving box of not taxes. Taste not taxes. Sing not taxes a lullaby. Hope not taxes sleeps throughout the night. Grab a saddle and ride not taxes off into the beautiful sunset. With TurboTax, an expert will do your taxes from start to finish, ensuring that your taxes are done right, guaranteed, so you can relax. Feels good to be done with your taxes, doesn't it? Come to TurboTax and don't do your taxes. Visit TurboTax.com to learn more. Intuit TurboTax, full service products only, video meeting while expert does your taxes required. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, let's get into some of the final takeaways from this one. I mentioned the rebounding at the end of last segment because that was a big part. This Rockets team doesn't do a lot of things well, unfortunately, right? There's very few things that this Rockets team actually does well. Rebounding is one of them. They have been just monsters on the glass all season long, and this game was no different. I mean, Rockets crushed the Pistons on the board 48-35. They had a 21-4 edge in second chance points, and they outscored the Pistons in the paint 70-42. 70-42. They were plus 28 points in the paint. That's a huge differential right there. The Rockets were just kind of like, they were the aggressors in this game. I mean, they were just enforcing their will, attacking the glass again. The big, second chance putback opportunity late in the game to put the Rockets back out in front by Jae'Sean, Tate, KJ Martin. Like, that was kind of an encapsulation of this game and the ability of these guys to go out there and have those second chance opportunities. You look down the lineup, there were 3 different Rockets who had double-digit rebounds in this game. How often does that happen? How often do you look in a game and see not 1, not 2, but 3 guys with double-digit rebounds? Jabari Smith Jr. had 12 boards, KJ Martin had 13 boards, and then Tari Eason had 10 rebounds. And then even elsewhere across the lineup, right? Like Bruno Fernando had a few boards. Usman Garuba had 6. Jae'Sean Tate had 3 boards. Like they were absolutely killing it on the glass in this game. You love to see that. You love to see that hustle, that intensity, that fire. And that's what this group, like, it was like this entire group was just like the Goon Squad, like personified. Like that's what the Rockets won this game on the backs of the Goon Squad, it felt like. And that part of the game was great to see. And I think there were a couple comments by both John Lucas and Jae'Sean Tate in the aftermath of this game that I wanted to bring up here. First from Lucas, he said, with 3 key scorers out, I think a lot of guys were excited because the ball would be moving and they would get a chance to play. And then Jae'Sean Tate also said, I think everybody is happy when they get to shoot, share, or touch the ball. At the end of the day, we just care about winning, and everybody did exactly what we needed to do to win. I don't think either of these guys are taking like, subtle shots at, Jalen, KPJ, Alp, whatever. But there is a certain understanding of like, okay, like, yeah, those guys dominate the basketball a little bit, right? Like Jalen sometimes has a tendency to get sticky with the ball when he's not facilitating. Alp, same thing. Like sometimes Alp tunnel visions a little bit. He's clearly the best facilitator on the team, and he does try to involve his teammates. But there's also moments where Alp does just kind of tuck his head down and just try to make something happen. And then KPJ, right? Same deal. Same thing as Jalen. Sometimes the ball just gets sticky and they fall into like the bad habits with the ISO, whatever. Whereas in this game, there was much less of that, right? Like the ball, even during some of the points where it was sloppy, where there were turnovers, like there's a willingness and a desire and an understanding of like, okay, we're going to move the ball, right? We're going to try and get each other involved and like this, that. And even though they didn't have like the right like playmakers out there, and even though it looked rough, really rough for certain stretches, there was just an understanding like across the board of like, hey, we're going to get to play different because so many of these other guys are out of the lineup. And I would love to see kind of a mental shift to where like when Jalen and Sengun and eventually KPJ come back, right, for them to kind of embody that like team identity, right? Like, hey, I'm a part of a team, right? Like it doesn't all have to be on my shoulders. Right? Let's get everybody involved. Let's get all these guys going. Let's share the ball, share the rock, and then everybody's going to fight harder. Everybody's going to play harder. Everybody's going to try harder on defense. People are going to feel more connected, more engaged, more fired up, possession to possession, all of that. So I think that is a really big, important part. And maybe I'm reading too much into these 2 little quotes, but I think it bears mentioning that, again, they played with a lot of energy. They played with a lot of energy and a lot of intensity. I think a big part of that is the fire that John Lucas is able to light under these guys. And also, we'll say, credit to assistant coaches Mahmoud Al-Dafada and Rick Higgins, who were also at various points in this game. John Lucas was leaning on them. Those guys were in the huddles, leading some of these huddles for the Rockets, and it was almost like a coaching by committee thing. Very clearly, John Lucas was the lead, but him leaning on those guys and kind of giving them opportunities to like, hey, like let's tear into these guys. I don't know. It might be weird to say, but maybe Stephen Silas is holding the rest of this coaching staff back a bit. I don't know. Maybe again the mentality, the way that he approaches the game, his personality per se, like, I don't know if that is what's seeping into these players, but there's a different level of intensity and fire that these guys play with when Stephen Silas is not around. And we've seen it. We saw it in preseason. We saw it in the Milwaukee game, and we've seen it again in this game. And I think, unfortunately, for the Milwaukee game and the Pistons game, you can connect the dots and say maybe there is a little bit of like these guys are playing with a chip on their shoulder. They want to get a win for Coach Silas because he's not with the team because of the stuff with his father. Maybe that's an argument to be had. But these guys have played hard under Lucas, and I don't want to take that away from Coach Lucas because that I think is very, very evident in these games that we've seen. Elsewhere from this one, there was a point early in the game where like Bruno called out Daishen Nix, like just like yelled at him for like some bad transition defense, which was so like demonstrative and just maybe like a bit almost out of character for Bruno to just be like pleading. It was almost like the LeBron James, J.R. Smith meme, like, like pointing, like what are you doing? That was kind of funny. And I don't know, there were some good moments all throughout this game, but I think, just my final big overarching takeaway is just Overarching. Why don't I know how to pronounce words? I should have Googled that before deciding I was going to use it. Anyways, whichever version of that word I'm supposed to be using, big takeaway is both. I raved about KJ Martin. He's your Locked On Rockets player of the game. I gave him his flowers. But Tari Eason as well. I've said it before, Tari just makes things happen on the basketball court. He had 16 points, 10 boards, 1 assist, 2 steals. He had the sloppy turnover, got yelled at by Lucas, all that for sure. Tari and KJ are both starters right now. Tari could probably start on a handful of the bad teams in the association, right? Other rebuilding teams, I feel like they would have already thrown Tari out there and just been like, all right, go ahead, get out there, go do your thing. And the future's really bright for the wing spot for the Rockets because it's unfortunate, right, that Eric Gordon is still kind of absorbing those wing minutes. I do want to credit EG for the 7 assists that he had in this game, right? He's not a point guard by trade, but he steps up when he needs to. He tries to get the guys involved. He tries to facilitate. And even though the outside shot wasn't falling for EG, he was getting it done on the interior in this game, and he was facilitating at a solid level and getting to the free throw line. He had 7 makes, 7 trips, 7 makes for EG. So it wasn't the craziest, most efficient 24-point night for EG, only 8 of 17 shooting overall, but he spearheaded the scoring department for on a night where the Rockets were without their other 3 primary scoring options. So credit to Eric Gordon for stepping up when they needed him to. But Tari and KJ they're ready to go, man. They're ready to be unleashed. They're ready to be unleashed as permanent starters. And with a couple weeks out to the NBA trade deadline, less than a couple weeks, we are under the 2-week mark for the NBA trade deadline now. I hope that the Rockets are able to facilitate some kind of a move for Eric Gordon so that one of those 2 guys, whether it's KJ, whether it's Tari, whoever, can get the nod and get injected into the Rockets starting lineup, because we've just seen a night and day difference with the intensity, the physicality, the athleticism, just the level of play that happens when those guys are placed into the starting lineup. They produce, they make things happen. And it's long overdue at this point for KJ, and it's kind of even worse for KJ that it's happened to this point where now Tari is playing so well because now it's there's competition for his spot, the spot that probably should have been his a long time ago. But gas those guys up, right? Increase their value, and then maybe after a half season of both of those guys getting even more run on the wing, then maybe you're able to include one of them in a trade package for a splashy upgrade on the perimeter this offseason, something like that. Maybe an OG Anunoby type, right? If the Raptors are looking to blow things up in Toronto and they want to shop OG this offseason or around the NBA draft kind of time frame area, then KJ and Tari are both great young prospects that many teams out there in the NBA landscape would love to get their hands on. So give them those reps, right? Give them those increased minutes over this back half of the season. That's what it's about. More developmental reps. So that's what I've got from this one. It was a fun game. It just elsewhere it was cool. Ty Washington, only 4 minutes. That one was a little, I don't know if Ty is in John Lucas's doghouse or what, or Lucas was just, he was cool to just rely on Josh Christopher and Daishen Nix and Eric Gordon, but Ty Washington with only 4 minutes of run in this game was a little disappointing. But other than that, I can't say it was a quality win, but it was a gutsy win. Gutsy win for this Rockets team, and hopefully one that they sorely needed from an emotional standpoint, and something that can hopefully kind of steady things out for this group a little bit. And it told us a lot. It told us about how these guys respond to being, short-staffed, undermanned, whatever you want to call it. And it told us a lot about what John Lucas can get out of these guys. And I think it's something worth considering for this Rockets team moving forward. But with that, that's going to do it for today's episode. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, free and available on all podcast platforms. We're also available on YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Give me your thoughts on John Lucas as the potential interim head coach of this Houston Rockets team moving forward. If the Rockets were to move on from Stephen Silas, would this be the type of Rockets team that we would see more of moving forward? Pardon me, coughing at the end of the episode. That's awesome. Great way to close things out here. A little ASMR cough to close out the show. Let me know. Go comment on the YouTube page. But as always, thank you so much for checking out the show. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.